Good morning. It's June 1st, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. This is the live daily show with the Western Standard. We have a number of guests on. I get ranting out of my system, and we have some political discussion. Being live, if you have a comment, scroll whatever platform you may be watching on. Comments are welcome. Throw them at me. I don't necessarily respond to all of them. As some people have seen, I do often respond to them, though, and I could even get crabby with you now and then. No sense trying to provoke me, though. I'm usually crabby enough as it is. And again, have some discussion with each other. The advantages of being live is that you can interact with each other, with me, with guests, potentially, but we do want to keep it civil to a degree. We can get worked up. That's what I do, but we don't have to be too impolite. We can do this all in a civil manner. Okay, so let's see what the observations are for today. I don't want to mess up after causing all that controversy with the mix up on the Hug Your Cat Day. Today is National Go Barefoot Day. I guess going into June, for those who like going barefoot, this is the day to start doing it. And it's also National Nail Polish Day, so those kind of come together quite well. Get your feet fixed up, make them look a little better, and take them out and show them off to the world. No amount of nail polish is going to fix up the ugly claws I have under my shoes. It's pretty rare where you'll see me wearing anything open-toed or walking around barefoot. But for those who do enjoy it, hey, today's the day to get out there and show it off to the world. And again, watch where you're going to go do it, though. Downtown Calgary, I wouldn't recommend it. There's just far too many nasty things on the ground that you may encounter and cause you difficulty. But again, what's a day without observing what's so important day by day? Okay, we do have a number of guests on today. It's a busy one. I got Jeff Park with the Alberta Parents Union. He's going to be coming in studio in a little while and talking with me. And they're a new organization that's been going around. They got a lot of meetings set up throughout Alberta. And, their name sort of says it's a parents union and it's talking about education. I think education reform, education options. And we really need that in this province. These guys are organized and out there to try and get those needs filled. So we'll have a conversation with him. Kinga Zentner and Celeste Mint with Guided Journeys Foundation. These guys are in southern Alberta, and the Guided Journeys Foundation is a palliative care center. It's a place, where they set up to help people, I guess, enter the great hereafter and pass on. And it's a part of healthcare we don't talk about a lot, actually, or even enough. But I mean, it's the final part, and we do have to address it. It's something I don't care for talking about myself, as I'm terrified of death, but all the same, it has to be discussed. So it'll be a good conversation with them as well. And then I'm going to round it out with Tony Bernardo from the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Of course, I'm certain he's going to have a lot to say on Justin Trudeau's latest legislation looking to, freeze handgun sales and probably, I think, moving on to banning them altogether in the long run. But we'll see what Tony has to say about that. So a pretty packed show today. So let's see what I'm wound up about today, and it's not that hard to find. The city of Calgary, and this applies to anybody with a municipal government. It really does. So, I mean, despite never having campaigned on it, the first thing Jyoti Gondek did as the newly elected mayor of Calgary was to declare a climate emergency. Her declaration was received with all the approval of a fart at a funeral. Undeterred, Gondek continued with her climate crusade and managed to get the Calgary Event Center project canceled within her first month as mayor due to rising costs, not the least of which were new climate change measures being applied to the project unexpectedly by the city. With all these efforts, Gondek managed to win the dubious honor of being the least popular newly elected Calgarian mayor in living memory, as her approval numbers plummeted to 38% within months of being elected. There is an emergency in Calgary, and citizens want it addressed. That emergency has nothing to do with the climate, however. I mean, over the course of the pandemic, Calgary's downtown has deteriorated into something akin to a dystopian scene from a movie. Ground-level businesses are all graced with for lease signs, while 30% of the office spaces remain vacant. Addicts and homeless people are everywhere, while discarded needles and human waste have become common sights on the streets in downtown Calgary. People don't feel safe downtown in response. Calgary constantly attacks their police force, though, with threats of defunding and demoralizing them with the ordered removal of a patch that commemorated fallen officers. It's not going to make us any safer, guys. Calgary's transit service is still at only 60% of the use it was at prior to the pandemic. The reason, again, for this is clear. Addicts are passed out in bus shelters. The only thing that drowns out the smell of piss on trains is the wafts of meth smoke as it's openly consumed on the cars. People have been randomly attacked on train platforms, and the city closed a number of expensive train stations rather than deal with the addicts who had set up camp within them. The city's latest effort to get people to use transit is an initiative to cut fares in half for a couple of months. They've also implemented a policy calling for heavy fines for a person if they can't call a woman on a sidewalk, but they have no plans on dealing with aggressive addicts. Even if transit was free, people aren't going to ride it if they don't feel safe. But these cloistered, naive city councillors will never understand this as they drive and park in their secure indoor parkade. Whether Calgarians like it or not, Gondek's climate crusade is the city's top priority, and the climate plan the Calgary's administration released is shocking. Calgary's climate change plan is set to come in at a cost of $87 billion over the next few decades. It's not a typo, it's not misreading. $87 billion in one city. With fewer than 1 million people of tax-paying status in the city, that amounts to over $87,000 per taxpayer, or about $3,100 a year. Think of that in a household with a number of people. What are we looking at? $7,000 tax increase to do this? The plan sets an impossible bar of becoming a net zero city in emissions by 2050, along with forcing 60% of Calgarians to travel without personal vehicles. They will have somehow eliminated all non-electrical vehicles by then, or as well, by the way. New building codes and retrofitting is going to cost a fortune. Calgary is already in an economic crisis, and these ludicrous regulations are going to make the city an investment pariah. Neighboring municipalities have been reaping the benefits of Calgary's woke administration as citizens and businesses alike have been fleeing the city to escape the taxes and regulation. The city's latest plan is going to cause nothing short of an outright evacuation. The bill for the city's climate action dreams are only going to be filled with massive tax increases upon businesses and homes. The actions of the city are only going to exacerbate the existing problems downtown. Calgary's downtown is going to be increasingly moribund, and budgets are going to fall short as producers flee the city. Calgary's myopic mayor and city council will likely only respond with further tax hikes to fill the budget void. They can't seem to think any farther than that. This city, the once and great thriving of city of Calgary, is on the path of becoming another Detroit, or maybe San Francisco, where one has to avoid stepping in human excrement while trying to navigate through the endless tent cities. Calgary is far from alone in this. Many municipalities have allowed their governance to be taken over by delusional woke politicians, and we're all paying a hard price for it. And in the end, the responsibility still falls on the voters. If we keep refusing to pay attention to who's running for office, it's inevitable that a gang of clowns is going to rise to the top, as they have in Calgary. We keep our eyes too focused on federal and provincial politics at times and forget who's controlling our lives locally. For that electoral error, Calgary and many other cities are on the road to economic ruin, and it won't do a damn thing to help the environment. So pay attention, folks. It's only going to get worse. All right, let's get on with some news here and talk to Melanie Risden in the newsroom and see what else is happening out there. Hey, Mel, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm all
outside
right.
of your rant?
I'm just trying to, well, thankfully, I'm just outside of the city, though they always find ways to nickel and dime you on fees, and I pay taxes in other ways in the city. But just trying to figure out how I'll come up with that budget to cover this plan to save the world.
Yeah, it seems strange too. Again, my whole take on it is, being penalized when we, in many circumstances don't even have alternatives yet. So very strange. And in fact, we do have that story on the website. Our reporter Amanda Brown has dug into that climate initiative that is going to, as you mentioned, Cory, cost us to the tune of $87 billion over the coming decades for this municipal climate plan in Calgary. It's going to be a pricey one. We have some great stories up. One from the World Health Organization regarding the unsuccessful bid to forward its pandemic treaty. It's now concluded at the World Health Assembly, and several politicians from around the world have actually come forward to sort of call it a victory, including our CPC leadership candidate and MP Leslyn Lewis. So we've got that story up on the site. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe appoints the province's first female justice minister during Tuesday's cabinet shuffle. We've got another story on opposition leader Candice Bergen. She's calling out the Prime Minister for penalizing Canadians at the pump on purpose, just sort of continuing to fortify the fact that he is looking to pull investment from Canada's energy sector. Bank of Canada has raised interest rates yet again. So if you have a mortgage coming up for renewal soon, sounds like those rates are expected to continue to climb over the next year or so. So lock them in as soon as you can. Vaccine mandates have led to the discharge or discipline of about 1,600 soldiers within Canada. Also, speaking of soldiers in Canada, we've got a column coming out from our Linda Slobodian with regard to how veterans, our Canadian veterans, are waiting just an absolutely agonizing long period of time to access their disability benefits. In some cases, up to 2 years before they're able to access the benefits that they need to deal with injuries, PTSD, things like that. So just a very sad story there for the people, for the women and men who have served our country. We also have a story up from our BC reporter, Reed, who looked into BC being the first province to decriminalize cocaine, meth, and ecstasy. So going a little bit beyond the marijuana drug of choice. And we've got another column coming out from our Mike Thomas, who says, Trudeau is an authoritarian creep. So you can dig into that. He's got comments from several people. And our reporter Amanda Brown is digging into a story on Tim Hortons app. I don't know, Cory, are you a Tim Hortons fan, or do you drink Tim Hortons coffee?
No, their coffee is vile and overrated, but I got to admit, Jane is an addict to it, so I've consumed a fair amount. Well, we have to, it's easier than fighting over which drive-through we're going to go to.
Right. And same with my husband, big fan of the Tim's coffee. He has the Tim's app. I'm not sure if your wife does, but apparently it's come out now that the app has almost continuously been tracking people with the app through geolocations. So we'll have that story coming up here fairly soon.
Yeah, so you can't even buy a cup of coffee without losing your rights to privacy. Well, again, we do it willingly. We're not paying attention. We install these apps, and we'll see as that story develops. Maybe somewhere in the small print when that app was installed on their phones or whatever, there was something saying they were going to do it, and people didn't pay attention.
Well, and that's a good point. It's a good point. Those all of those little things that you're signing off on when you accept the app, you really might want to take some time to read some of those.
Yeah, the small print, it'll get you every time. I still remember buying into getting, I think it was, like a free cassette every few months from Columbia House or something, and I didn't read the small print. And those guys were after me for years afterwards.
Years. Oh, I know. It was hard. I had that too. It was hard to get out of that one.
Right on. Okay, well, thanks, Melanie. Lots to cover and lots to write on as always. So I appreciate you giving us the update, and I'll talk to you later.
Of course.
Yes, that's our Melanie Risden. You can watch. She's been doing the news reads as well. You can see the video versions of some of these stories. That's something we're expanding on a lot here. We still want you to subscribe and read. That is essential and important. But hey, you can look on our YouTube channels, our Rebel channels, and you'll see even TikTok these days, and it's been picking up. You can catch some of these stories being read by the reporters and columnists who have written them. As well, of course, though, subscriptions are essential, and that's how we can keep doing this. That's how we remain an independent news outlet and not beholden to the government or anybody else. We're only beholden to you, and it's been great. We've been expanding. We're getting some new video and camera equipment soon, so our field reporters across the country will be able to get better quality material out to you. And again, it's all thanks to you guys who've been subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed already, get on board, guys. This is how we can beat down the CBC. This is how we can crush the CTV, by having these outlets like this get the news out there directly and without that government influence. We don't take tax dollars. We qualify for them. We won't take them. So if, hey, for $99 a year, $10 a month, if you go month by month, so, we're not asking for charity. We're just asking you to invest some money to get that news content out to you. And as you can see, more and more stories every day. These check-ins, Dave and I used to have to babble for a long time. To fill time during the news check-ins because we'd only have half a dozen stories or so. But now, many, many stories from all across the country and reporters all over the place. So, Laura Watson asking, if we subscribe, will you track your customers? Well, fair enough question, I guess. The tech area is outside of mine. There will be some degree of tracking of it. I mean, we need to know the person's name, and they will pay in one way or another. It doesn't give we don't get your personal payment information or things like that. Might find your area and region. As far as tracking goes, no, we don't look for individuals or anything like that. I don't think we have the ability for it. But we of course track the number of people who read certain stories and from which regions they came from and all of that sort of stuff. The data is always out there and it's being shared, and it's valuable. It's valuable to us actually as an outlet, and we look at it. This is how we model what we do. If we find that certain areas of news aren't drawing attention, people don't want to read it, people don't want to view it, well, then we move on to different areas. If we find certain regions are softer, stronger, we work on how we're going to promote things over there at different age demographics. What stories are they drawn to if we know an age demographic? All of these things, every business looks into this. I mean, the data is very, very valuable. So, I don't really blame the businesses for going out to get it, but at the same time, you can't do it. You can't sneak to do it, and you can't be tracking people. The thing with Tim Hortons, that app was tracking where they go and everything. And that's not necessary, or at least it's far more intrusive than I think anybody signing up for it realized they were getting into. So we won't be chasing you down, tracking you that far. Though I guess if you sign up and you subscribe, we'll give you subscription reminders and things like that. We also get a newsletter that comes every day. So that way in the morning you can get up, see what's on top of the news in your email and what's happening there. No, we won't be tracking you too intrusively. We just want your subscription and your viewership, which we appreciate. Jet Gorgon saying, don't forget, yesterday was Vulva and Vagina Day. An MP in Parliament said so. Yes, I saw that. I retweeted that video because I couldn't even believe it when I saw it on Twitter yesterday. And she stood up, and that's what it's all about. Yesterday was the day to get up and celebrate vulvas and vaginas. Good on them. I guess there should be nothing shameful about having a vulva or a vagina. But I don't know if we need a member of Parliament to stand up and declare that we all celebrate it. I believe Larry Flint has been celebrating it excellently on the pages of Hustler magazine since the 70s or 80s or so. And now on the internet, it's celebrated all over the place if you don't have your safe search turned off or on. But all the same, this is what our parliamentarians are doing. This is where our money is being spent. And this is the important things they want to address. I can't wait to see some of the other things they'll come up with in there. It's funny, there's some of the comedy and things like that just seem to write themselves with what our elected members do in there. Meanwhile, they're, we've got big issues going on. The authoritarian trend. I'm getting really, really distressed and disturbed with where our government's going. Every move they do is another move to infringe on our freedoms. They're fixated on it. They're fixated on it. They, with the C7, that's or S7, it's a Senate bill, and that's where they want to give customs agents the ability to actually search and rifle through your phones and laptops, your data, and get into it. That one's being fought out in Parliament. C11, C18, those are both digital bills, again, which want to control what you can see, what you can communicate, what media outlets are official, which aren't. Control, control, control. Of course, the firearm seizure, handguns, they're after them. They're taking them. That's their next push. Vaccine mandates, as we spoke of, they won't get dropped. They will not back off on this. They're fixated on it. There's no scientific basis. There's no medical evidence. There's no good reason for the federal government to maintain these vaccine mandates, but they won't stop. They won't back off on it. This government is, what was the other article said? Mike Thomas called him Trudeau a creepy authoritarian. I think it's a fantastic description. And meanwhile, they do their other things. Hey, squirrel, it's Vagina and Vulva Day, while we seize all your property and firearms. This is a very distressing place we're in, and I don't know. We can just keep reporting on it, fighting back, pushing, voting. Again, I've said it before, I say it again, it's going to take, this Canada's broken. It's broken. I don't know when it'll happen, but in the long run, we have to tear it down and rebuild it. There has to be a successful independence movement somewhere. I don't know if it'll be Quebec or Alberta. I don't know if it'll be 10 years or 20 years or next year. But there's no fixing this mess. There's no fixing this mess. The only question is how far we're going to slide before we get there. All right, let me reach into one of our sponsors here and talk briefly about that. And that is Bitcoin Well. These guys have been sponsoring us for quite some time. We usually have a lot of discussion after that. People are mixed on digital currencies, whether they're a good idea or a bad idea, which currency, how you get involved in it. Fair enough. Everything's open for discussion. That's what we're about. Bitcoin, well, anyhow, though, one of the things I like to promote with them is they're safe. They are, I'm not talking about, whether Bitcoin itself or digital currencies are safe in the long run as a good investment or bad. I don't know. I'm not an investment advisor. If you're going to get into it, though, they are a publicly traded company in Alberta. They're real. There's so many scammers out there involved with things. These guys are not that, of course, at all. And the best way you can prove that is sitting down. They offer face-to-face service, one-on-one. You can have a free consultation talking with them. If you're in a more rural area or a different part of Canada, you might have to do it through Zoom, but you will get to speak to the real person. They'll lead you through it. That's their whole thing, is facilitating the transaction, making sure your money is safely managed and always in your hands. It's always in your hands. So if you're looking to get into Bitcoin, this is the place to start. Check out their website. They got all sorts of stuff on bitcoinwell.com, resources, how to learn what it's about, how you can buy or sell it, where you can practically use it, whether utility bills or savings plans, any of those things. They're a great sponsor and they're providing a good service. So check them out, guys, bitcoinwell.com. And again, take control of your money. Yeah, what do we see here? Jet Gorgon saying he's doing his RPAL course next week. Hope he can get a license before the kill date. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the RPAL is going to be pretty pointless pretty soon. For people unfamiliar with it, that's for a restricted firearm of any kind, whether it's a handgun or I believe there's some restricted long guns as well. And I mean, some of the other crap they've packed into that bill, it's not just the handguns they're after. So the capacity reduction for long guns and rifles, everything's incremental. They're always digging at us, and it's not making us any safer. So now any rifle, no matter what, cannot hold, or at least when this legislation goes through, will not be able to have a capacity of more than 5 shots. It's pretty functional, I guess, with 5 shots already, but it wasn't a problem having more. In fact, larger rifles already had that limitation on them. You had to modify the capacity to make sure it couldn't take any more than 5. But there was exceptions made for rimfire rifles, which are typically very small caliber firearms. So yeah, that's one of the ones I have at home, a little rimfire 22. Now it will be criminalized because that little rimfire 22 can hold 10 bullets. So what? From 5 to 10. It's just an inconvenience. It just means I have to change clips a heck of a lot more if I'm out messing around, shooting targets or whatnot. And it's not making anybody safer. There hasn't been mass shootings happening in Canada, period, or particularly not with a rimfire 22. These are the things you shoot gophers with. Or again, the targets and things like this. But this is what the government's cracking down on. They're illegal. They're ignoring the problem and going after legal firearms owners who weren't causing issues. Cheryl Dawn said they've been waiting for their PAL and our PAL since May 31st, 2021. Yeah, that's a long haul. Yeah, my last one took a long time to get into. It did get it, but boy, it was something else. Let's see. Yeah, so that Dallin guy is saying every rimfire, lever gun, shotgun that holds more than 5. Yeah, so 30-30 lever action guns hold 6. So something will have to be modified to keep that legal, I imagine. And it's just expensive and a pain and so on. Wild Rose saying, you heard I'm speaking at a Wild Rose event soon. Yes, actually, on the 11th, I'll be talking. Again, I'm not part of the Wild Rose party. I'm not endorsing them or anything. I was invited to a town hall, though, which is fine. And of course, I support, I would for any party if I have the time, because I like to speak on these issues. And I'll be speaking there in Red Deer about alternative media and independent media. So, a subject I'm very familiar with, and its impacts on politics, its development, and its future. So it'll be an extended rant. I think Paul was saying I'll get about 15 minutes up there to bend people's ears, and we'll have a discussion of those things. So it should be a good afternoon, I think. But we'll see. Getting people out in June can be tough. Somebody's saying some guns can't be modified for 5 or less without destroying the gun. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a firearms expert. I mean, I own some firearms. I enjoy them responsibly, as we see. I've never been charged or convicted with anything. I wouldn't hurt anybody. But I'm one of the ones, I guess, that gets targeted. I don't know the ins and outs of every particular firearm. And that's part of what the government takes advantage of, too, is, people don't necessarily know what's going on, and they come after it. All right, so let's see. MPs are endorsing ethics reforms. Now, this is interesting. As a little while ago, the members of parliament had shot down a motion to raise the fines, because the fines for a breach and ethic violations was $500 maximum. And, it's ridiculous. These are some pretty well paid people. That's not really going to be a big deterrent for them to breach their ethics. And, but still, they felt it would be unreasonable to raise it higher. But now at least they've endorsed 169 to 153 in a vote, endorsed, an ethics committee report calling for tougher laws on conflict of interest. Small victories, will take what we can, and it's just a committee report. Doesn't mean it's in, it doesn't mean, but they're moving a little bit towards the right direction, very slowly and agonizingly so. I imagine maybe just whenever the heck we get rid of Prime Minister Ding Dong there, we might be able to get some changes in. But when you look at what happened with the We Foundation and all that sort of thing, and Aga Khan, with his ongoing constant chronic ethics breaches, he's not going to want to have to pay any more than he has to before he gets out of there. But either way, surprisingly, they seem to be shutting down every other effort. They did vote to embrace that bit of reform. So that's a little bit of good news. Let's see. My guest appears to be running late, so we'll just keep babbling at you until he arrives. That's all right. There's always lots to babble about. So let's see. Here we go again. As we're getting these Senate hearings and things like that, we get a lot of stories on it, Dave, right? So as they put them up again, just to keep, plugging for our own business as well while we're at it. But it's true with all these Senate meetings and committee meetings. This is where the meat and potatoes really are in politics. And it's the boring stuff, but it's where they do stuff. And we've got to watch for it. So there've been a lot of follow-up on this convoy. And police force by police force, we've been seeing them all coming up saying, we didn't call for the Emergencies Act. The chief of lying there, the minister, Mendocino, is constantly saying the police are the reason they wanted to bring in the Emergencies Act. And they can't find a police force anywhere in Canada. Another one came up recently, said, no, it wasn't us. The RCMP said it wasn't them, and the Ottawa police said it wasn't them. And I think the OPP said it wasn't them. So I don't know if he's going to be able to find, some distant police force somewhere to pretend and claim that they asked for it. So as we keep following up, there's just no justifying the imposition of the Emergencies Act. The government can't do that. Now they're determining that it was hard to quantify the harm. That's the thing, is no one could point at anything that made the Freedom Convoy so harmful or harmful. And let's see, I'm trying to see this pure chaos of the protest. Okay, chaos is fine, but does it call for imposing the Emergencies Act? The compounded result of multiple daily acts of aggression in our downtown made neighborhoods' life unbearable. Okay, but again, the questions were asked. Well, can you talk a little bit about the impact on your health? Because they were saying there's health impacts. Maybe this person said, well, there's no one act that you could point to that resulted in severe harm, but it was many, many. The bottom line is they're talking in circles, these counselors, because they talked about how it was everything from PTSD to hearing loss to harm to loss of sleep to stress, you name it. And they can't justify it later, though, when asked. We had seniors terrified of leaving the apartment, this person said. And people with rainbow flags had windows broken and defecation on their front lawn. Yet nobody could prove it. Nobody's seen it. She said, oh, it's based on anecdotes from Twitter users. Oh, yes, Twitter. There's a solid area of information. That's a great spot for good news, right? You can believe everything you see on Twitter, can't you? I mean, I like Twitter. I get on there. That's where I roll up my sleeves and really get into it in politics, and roll in the mud with people. But I mean, you can find news as it breaks on Twitter, and you can find some interesting things, but that's an area with a huge grain of salt. And when you get these clowns, it's not just some moron. It is a moron, but you see, this is a moron in an elected position. This was a counselor. This is one of the ones, again, giving out the reasons why they felt they had to have the Emergencies Act imposed. They did it based on tweets. I don't think that's quite enough, guys. Are we going to learn about this from this? I don't know. Jet Gorgon saying, did Alberta decriminalize hard drugs too? No, that's a BC initiative that's going on out there. I don't know if that's necessarily all that bad a move. You got to remember, there's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. So it's still not legal fully to carry some of, meth or cocaine or things around in a small amount. It's just that it's not a crime exactly. I know it's a narrow difference. It's more like getting into the speeding ticket realm rather than the crime realm. And the bottom line is the addicts, criminalizing them, it just isn't doing any favors. It doesn't work. What help is it in charging somebody for having a half a gram of meth or something on them? I don't want to think about people having it, and I don't want to see it proliferating. But no charges or threats or fines stop these addicts. These are people that are out of control. And for the larger amounts of those drugs, they're still very much illegal, and as much so as before. And that's where you want to focus on is the traffickers, the unprincipled people getting those into the hands of others. And that's that difference between decriminalization and legalization. So it's an important difference and distinguishing between them. I'm just saying, I don't know if it's as big a deal as people worry about. I mean, it's not saying you can just rampantly buy and sell hard drugs or that they want more people to use it. It's just a means of reprioritizing. I mean, our courts are overloaded, our jails are overloaded. I'd rather see them filled with violent criminals if we have to. And the people who are dealing these drugs, the people who are at the heart of this issue, rather than the consumers who, as you go out and see those zombies on the street, they're problematic and they commit some crimes, and that's a separate issue. But the actual possession of the drugs themselves, I don't know if that's really actually helping at all. So, I think we're reading a little too much into that, but that's where more of the libertarian in me comes in than the classic conservative sort. So looks like our guest is just getting set up here shortly. So that's great. And this is Jeff Park. I've been looking forward to speaking with him. They've got the initiative going with the Alberta Parents Union. This is an area that people aren't speaking enough for themselves. I mean, when I talked about the apathy and the damage it causes in civic politics and so on, our apathy and not advocating for ourselves and for our children has let things slide as well. So we become beholden to teachers' unions and school boards that don't necessarily reflect the needs or wants of the parents and the students who are going to be the beneficiaries or victims of whatever policies we come out with. So without further ado, let's get to Mr. Park. Hey, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Cory.
Good. Glad you made her in there.
Yeah.
So
it is a bit of a maze the first time.
It can be, yes. Yeah, you just remember that middle building.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got you here, and I kind of framed it a bit, but maybe I've got that correct on what your initiative is. I know you got a lot of meetings coming up. Perhaps, I guess, if you could start just in a nutshell, what is the Alberta Parents Union, and what are you looking to do?
Sure. The Alberta Parents Union in the old-fashioned sense of the word of people coming together for a common goal, where parents who want to have more of a voice, more impact in the K through 12 education system. So, I've been hearing from a lot of parents, especially over the last 2 years, about how things have just gotten too big, too far away from the parents, where we have a system that's is supposed to be designed around parental authority and around parents driving quality in the education system, especially to the extent that the money does follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. But that started to erode, and we're getting away from that, and too much reliance on the so-called experts, when the real experts on any individual kid are the parents of that kid.
Well, that's it. And we have, I mean, just speaking for myself, one of the things I get frustrated with is teachers' unions or other advocates. And so I'll say, keeps pointing out all the time for things like standardized testing. Well, every child is different. Everyone learns differently, and we can't have that standardized testing to measure. I kind of agree. That's fair enough. The parents know as well. Their children respond. This child responds to this doesn't with that. But if anybody talks about changing the status quo from a standard, well, then all of a sudden, no. We have to keep the public system, only one model, one curriculum, right, no matter what. And the parents are ignored. It's time to crack that double standard a little.
Absolutely. And if you were to suggest moving to the system that we have in education in any other area, including healthcare, by the way, where you take your pile of taxpayer money with you to whichever doctor you choose, and the bad doctors go out of business because no one picks them. Imagine that we said we're going to residentially assign you grocery stores, and you have to go shop for groceries at the nearest grocery store, and it's a monopoly option. You don't get any other choices, or if you do, you've got to pay for it again. You've got to pay the grocery store closest to you, and then pay again for a grocery store that will actually serve you and meet your needs. everyone would think that was insane, but because it's the status quo in education, it's considered radical to violate it.
Yeah, so you're looking at offering or promoting choice in education. Then I
Yes.
mean, we've got a few options right now, charter schools,
Sure.
and they're starting to grow and develop, but they've got a great deal of limitations. So you're looking to expand more of those alternatives. Then?
Yes, more choices, less limitations on those choices. You know, there. I mean, it's like, so Alberta, the only province in Canada that allows charter schools, and that's great. But it's like when we introduced them, we were almost afraid they would be too successful. They started out capped the total number of charter schools. There no online charter schools, no co-location between two charter schools. It's
Very
it's all that,
regulated,
yeah, it's all this. All these hurdles, like we were too afraid they would be too successful, and that's so much of the choice in education. It's almost afraid that it'll be too successful, undermine undermine the world-class public system, when really we have a world-class system because of the choice and competition. Like in everything else, competition drives quality, and so even for the majority of kids that are never going to go to anything but a fully lit public school, the quality is driven for them as well by those other options being there.
Yeah, and I mean, we're just seeing a lot of controversial subjects entering curriculums or getting into classrooms that not every parent is comfortable with. And when their children essentially locked into one system, you have no choice or direction towards what they're going to be learning. I mean, there's always going to be a core curriculum, I imagine. You have to have that.
Sure.
But
or core standards at
least.
Yes.
But with some choice, parents could choose to put their children into facilities that might not be putting some of that other messaging out that they don't.
Sure. Kids are not one size fits all. Education is not one size fits all. The idea that there would even be one size fits all curriculum for 4 million Albertans is kind of crazy. So what we need is and then if all we can do is change these things from the top down, then all we can do is have these super politicized fights where one side wins and one side licks their wounds and is going to get revenge the next time. And so the other option is pluralism and choice, where we empower parents to go to whatever choices, and the choices that succeed are the choices we'll see more of. And that's how we get in, just like in every other thing, like buying groceries, how we get quality.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the arguments against, and I'll throw that out there, it grinds against some people's, I mean, you're talking something along the lines of like a voucher system. That's the term that's used. The money's following the student. I think it's great. So, but one of the things some parents get upset with is saying, well, if you're in a rural community, you don't have the local options. My child won't be able to attend that diverse variety of things. And those resources will be pulled away from our communities. And they feel it's unfair and that their child is at a disadvantage. How can you address that?
Well, so there are fewer options in rural areas because of regulation, because co-location, because these things are difficult to start and maintain. We don't have that problem. So, I mean, look, when the like it or loathe it, when the government got out of the way and cannabis shops were allowed to pop up, they popped up all over, rural and urban. It didn't matter. So in the same sense, when the government gets out of the way to allow education options to pop up, you know, India has supposedly a fully funded public system from the top down. But what's really helped India do so well in education is they've got all these tremendously low-cost private schools all over in every little town. And it's just because the government, even when they might have wanted to get in the way of that, have not been able to get in the way of it. So it's let 1,000 flowers bloom. And that's the sort of thing in our rural areas, it's the same solution.
And it's good. I mean, I keep getting back to, I mean, they try to talk out of both sides of the mouth. The defenders of the status quo. I don't want to label everybody. There's some fantastic teachers and people within the unions even and so on. But
absolutely.
Like speaking for myself, I was a pain in the butt student, low marks. My parents finally outsourced it for some discipline and sent me to an all-boys school in Shawnigan Lake, BC. And, you know, lo and behold, in a discipline environment, my marks shot right up. But that's me. Another student might have responded terribly in that environment and done very poorly.
Absolutely.
and I mean, it's just that choice. It's that recognizing that there's differences, and some people are more inclined to different fields and different types of learnings than others. And I just, we're really doing our kids a disservice, I think, with this stubborn clinging to this centralized, one size fits all system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because again, as with everything else, we know that more options, more choices is the way forward with better quality. It's the idea that one education minister or one educrat in Edmonton can know what's best for my child better than I do is frankly insane to most parents, which is why I thought it's important to get the parents organized around this, because I think it's just natural to most parents to realize that there might be people more expert in curriculum development or pedagogy or any number of other things, but there is no more expert in my 4 children, except maybe my wife, but I'd even argue that.
I'll leave you to
that. But there is no one more expert in my children than my children's parents.
So getting that much inside, though, with the system, say, where the funding was following the student, would that apply then directly to homeschooling if parents choose that as well? I mean, the resources coming into the household to choose to be able to do that?
Yeah, so there are some home educators that don't want that. They think that inevitably the money will come with more government control. We would obviously say that the solution there is to trust the parents and to not bring that. But I think that Alberta's model with funded and unfunded does make sense, so that you have that option for home educators who are afraid of regulation following the money. That we have the unfunded option for them. But yes, absolutely. Just independent schools and home education between 2008 and 2018 saved the Alberta government $1.9 billion. So look, we can, and the government is so stingy with that $850 they give to funded home educators, and seems like there are almost no controls on the $30,000 they give per student to, say, the Northland School Division, which is one of the most failing school divisions in the province. That's obviously so upside down. So we've got to trust the parents and recognize that we can afford to give more money, and it will save money to let people have these other options and make it more accessible to more families.
Right. So your organization now, you're traveling the province. There's a number of meetings and events coming up. So what are you doing, I guess, to bring this about, to promote what you want to do?
Sure. So, right. As you said, we're traveling the province. We just had a great meeting here in Calgary last night. We're headed to Drumheller tonight, and so Drumheller will be the 8th stop. We've got 16 or 17 more after that, trying to just hear from a broad swath of parents all over the province to tell us what our priorities should be, what sort of advocacy they expect to see from us. And those meetings have been going great. And so we're the main way we're promoting this is via email. So people can go to albertaparentsunion.ca, great website, and sign up for the mailing list so that they can get our updates about that. But yeah, that's our main task right now, is just hearing from the parents, and then we'll start the ball rolling on some of that advocacy.
Great. And then with that advocacy, well, it looks like we're a year from an election. This is provincial jurisdiction.
Yes.
For what you would like to see, that would involve legislative change, then, I imagine, like
Yes.
the Education Act or something has to be changed or amended. The goal, I imagine, would be to encourage the provincial politicians and representatives to reform that system.
Sure. Yes, and so it is provincial, but it's also hyper local. Some of the issues that parents are bringing up are the issues for local school boards to address as well. So we're needing to address these things on both of those levels, and obviously we see the advantage of devolving more of those decisions down to as local of a level as possible. The kitchen table would be the most local and the best option as far as we're concerned, but but down to the individual school level as much as possible, so that because even the school boards are too big for parents to feel like they're having their voice heard. It's too bureaucratic, and so yeah, we're also working on driving things down to the more local level. But obviously, some of even that requires provincial legislation first.
Yeah, and again, these school boards, I mean, some of them, I'm not seeing it as much in Alberta, but there's questionable things. But like that Toronto school board, I mean, they give me more, foundation to rant from. And they do. They pride themselves on how many millions of children that they represent, or hundreds of thousands. And some of their policies are outright crazy.
Mhm.
These are not people I want guiding my children in any sort of way. And I understand they're elected, but obviously they're not serving the parents necessarily that well. But that's it actually gets back to a bit of a rant I had at the start of the show about municipal politics. If we don't get involved and pay attention, these Fruit Loops will rise to the top, and they'll guide policy. So I imagine you're looking to get more civic engagement as well.
Absolutely. Well, one of the problems is, if you want to follow the Alberta Teachers Association party line and vote for the trustees they want, that's really easy. It's really easy to know. Who you should vote for if that's the viewpoint you hold. But if you want someone who, say, doesn't want to abolish the separate system, doesn't want to defund independent schools, doesn't want to close down unfunded home education even, then where do you go? And there is a knowledge gap there. So we're also working on trying to close that, be able to reach out to more of these people, get them on the record on the issues, and make that available to regular parents so that they can know who to vote for in this election. Because about half the people who vote for their county councilor will vote for their public school trustee in the same jurisdiction. So, and it's because of a lack of knowledge.
Well, that's it. I mean, you ask your average person, I got to admit, I don't know. Ask your average person who their local school trustees
Sure.
are. They probably don't even know the name. I can name my MLA. I can name my member of parliament. I can name a bunch of cabinet ministers because I'm a political weenie. But school trustees, well, since my kids aren't in the system any longer either, but it's still important.
Sure.
We forget about that. We neglect it. And if we neglect any democratic exercise, we're not going to get a better outcome.
That's right. And we know that the people towing the ATA party line are going to show up at these elections. So that leads to this unbalanced system where one side of this argument is heavily overrepresented, and we're just not showing up at the table. And decisions are made by the people who show up, as always.
Well, it sounds like a great initiative and really interesting. So I appreciate you coming in to talk to us about this today. And maybe just one more time to the audience, how can people find you guys? Make sure they can catch these meetings in person if they can, and just get more information about your organization in general.
Sure. AlbertaParentsUnion.ca, sorry. AlbertaParentsUnion.ca is the place to find all of that. We've got an events tab that's telling you where. Now we've got all our events booked. We've actually gotten venues everywhere but High Level Lacrete. If anyone knows anyone there that could get us a spot, that's great. We're working on that. Might have that done by the end of the day even. But everywhere else in the province, we've got booked, so you can find where we are in your area, and then and sign up for the mailing list so that you can know when we're having events in the future as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, and
so
we'll watch your movement carefully, and I'm sure we'll probably have you in to talk again.
Okay. Thanks so much, Cory.
Thank you. So that was Jeff Park with the Alberta Parents Union, a different sort of union altogether when you hear the word union, but they're doing some great work. I really do. It's something we got to address more. And I'm guilty of the apathy when it comes to these, school boards and things such as that as well. You got to pay attention. You got to be engaged. I noticed a few commenters bringing up trades, and it's another area that education really falls short in. I graduated high school, mostly graduated either way in '88. It's getting back a ways. And I came out of high school, I guess is a better way to put it. I didn't know what a trade was. I really didn't. I didn't know what an apprenticeship was. I had no idea. And at no point in my high school and junior high was I ever even just told, how would you become an electrician if you wanted to do that? Or how would you become a plumber? Now, I grew up in Banff, so maybe there weren't as many options, but still, I mean, we neglect that. And there was a lot of an attitude, I hope it's better more in schools. It's almost as if either you get a post-secondary degree or you're a janitor, and there's no in between. And of course, it's not the case at all. And there's a lot of students that well drawn to trades, and there's nothing wrong with them. You don't see a plumber driving a beat up old car. They're doing quite well for themselves. It's good, secure work. So it's another area that needs some reform and battle. But okay, we're going tight with the guests today. I'll get on to the next ones. I see them in the lobby getting together, and this is a bit of a pivot onto a different subject, and that is with the Guided Journeys Foundation, and they are working on a palliative care center down towards Lethbridge, and we've got what do we got? Kinga Zentner and Celeste Mint, I believe. I hope I'm not destroying the pronunciation of their names too terribly much. And we'll have a discussion on, well, late life care, I guess. Hey guys, how you doing?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having us.
I really appreciate it. It's an area that we neglect, I guess, and it's something in healthcare. It is an aspect of healthcare that every one of us is going to need at some point or another. We want to put it off as long as possible, but we don't like talking about it. So it kind of gets overlooked, I guess you could say. And that's your final care when somebody's ready to pass away.
Correct. Yeah.
So maybe if I could get one of you to kind of just explain a little bit what your foundation does and what you're looking to do.
So what our goal is to build a hospice to serve Southern Alberta and the communities of Southern Alberta. So our first goal is to educate people about what palliative care is, because like you said, it's a subject that isn't talked about. So palliative care is specialized care given to people that have life-limiting illnesses and also to their families. So our goal is to provide the highest quality of end-of-life care for people that are on their dying journey. So the specialized care that's given involves multi-aspects. It's holistic care. So it not only provides patients with comfort for their physical needs, but also their emotional and psychological and support to the families going through a grieving process after.
Yeah, and so, I mean, facilities are limited, I imagine, for people. Like, is there something of a backlog? I think the center that you're looking to expand is going to have 10 spaces within it, and it just sounds like a modest amount even to begin with.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
how are...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, so what kind of accommodations, I guess, are there in Alberta already, and how long are the lists potentially?
So at this point, the nearest hospice to Lethbridge is in Okotoks. So there's a population of about 300,000 people in Southern Alberta. And every one of us at some point is going to go through that phase of the end of life. So it's important that we start to look at that. Our population down here is becoming more elderly. There's just so much, there's such a value in having a place like this. Everybody deserves to have the best quality of care while they're living. And that's what the goal is to provide that. So to have that facility in Southern Alberta is huge.
Yeah, so Guided Journeys is a registered charity. But then is there any public health funding that goes towards hospices, or is it fully kind of charitably funded and through local fundraising?
Absolutely. There is options where we can go through Alberta Health to have patient care assistance in getting their portion covered. What we're really trying to create is to bring our community together and have a 100% community-run hospice. It takes a village to raise a child, and we feel it's also going to take that same village to help that connection on going home and helping people walk through the death journey and the grief journey.
Yeah, and it's for more than just the patient. As you said, it's for the family. I see one of our commenters had pointed out that she had done the palliative care at home when her husband passed. Now, I don't know if that was her choice in that matter, or perhaps for lack of other options and facilities. But does your organization provide resources, though, for people that may want to choose to care for a loved one at home at that point in their life, like aside from being an inpatient circumstance?
They do. There is a community palliative care team here that's just got tremendous staff. But the problem with every person that I've dealt with, I've been a palliative care nurse for 15 years. The first goal they say is to die at home. But when the actual time of end-of-life care comes, the caregiver hits a point where they need to be a spouse, a child, and that's where we come in, is to provide that environment where it's like a home-like setting, and we can provide so much comfort, not just to the patient, but also to the family.
Absolutely. We want them to be able to focus on the time that they have left together and continue building memories right up until the end. And it really takes away when they have to look after the physical aspects of their loved one during their illness.
Yeah, and I mean, proximity to family and loved ones is obviously very important with this, especially if people might their peers or others might be mobility challenged or getting in later. And as you said, I was quite surprised actually that with a province as large as ours and so many people in Lethbridge, Fort Macleod, and down south, with Okotoks being the closest center, there's definitely you need something more locally.
For sure. And Kinga kind of touched on the community-based idea. What the Palliative Institute of Canada is looking at is called compassionate communities. Dying isn't just a medical issue. It's definitely a community issue. It impacts the community that you live in. It impacts the family. It impacts your religious denomination. It impacts schools. When you have children that are in school, that legacy and that life impacts every part of the community. So leaning towards a compassionate community is what the hospice is all about. And you mentioned the importance of family. A hospice provides all the amenities for a family to be there and be present with their loved one.
Yes, I believe I read on the website, or at least with the proposed center it would have facilities for overnight stays for family. Because again, I mean, you want to be as close as possible, as long as possible with somebody at that period, and you don't want to have to step out for the night and miss, I guess, what would be the most important moment, I guess you could say.
Right, absolutely.
So staffing is another thing. Now, this is such a specialized area of care. I mean, there's only so many people, I guess, with the emotional strength to do something this personal and important. I would imagine having a brick and mortar local facility would help in building and training a core of staff to be able to manage this as well.
Correct. And there's many educational opportunities for people to become certified in palliative care. It is very much a specialty type nursing. Most nursing is focused on life preserving. With palliative care, it's on providing comfort. So you have to be a different mindset to be able to work in there, and very compassionate. So that training certainly is offered, and there's so much interest in people that would like to do that type of care.
Great. So are you networked with other facilities throughout the province already, or in other provinces, or is this an independent sort of organization?
We're completely independent, but we have worked very closely and have been very, very fortunate to be under the guidance of the Edmonton Hospice as well as Okotoks. They've been sharing just their startup journey and how the community is helping them provide the best service that they are providing in their communities. And they've been absolutely amazing to work with, and just going above and beyond to help us get started and make sure that we're on the right path. So we're very fortunate.
And we also have connections with the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association. They've provided us with lots of guidelines. The Alberta Hospice Palliative Care Association also provides a lot of educational material and support material. And the Palliative Institute of Canada and of Alberta are also focusing on the compassionate community hospice. So,
and our community as well, as soon as we went live, just the amount of people that have reached out to us, just their willingness to help and wanting to, they're very eager to see this break ground and to get started and to start having patient care in our facility. It's been very overwhelming, the community support we've already received.
Well, and that's good to hear, and that's why I was glad to have you guys on, because again, it's something so important, and I'm as guilty as anybody. It's just a subject we often just don't want to talk about until we have to. We'll always have to. So we've just got to force that issue and bring it up and be proactive and get out there so that the community's responding. Well, we got to bring it to them, I guess, is the thing, and the people realize that need. So what's the timeline for the hospice you're looking to put to get rolling?
Well, our goal is 2 years. It's a huge undertaking to get a facility of that size built. So yeah, we're fairly new and fairly motivated. We've got an amazingly strong team and a very passionate team about doing this. So yeah, we're hoping that things just continue to move forward here.
Excellent. Well, I imagine you can only kind of do one project at a time in a sense, but I mean, would there be plans if this facility, you're a foundation, you'll be established, if this facility does well and is established, that you would expand, perhaps look to opening facilities in other, population centers that need them?
I think once this one is established, the idea of having satellite areas out in other communities would certainly be an option, but getting this one established right now is the number one goal, and go from there.
Great. Well, where can people find information about your organization and taking part or potentially utilizing the services down the road?
Absolutely. So we have our website, guidedjourneys.ca. We are on social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So there's lots of ways to get a hold of us and get in touch with us as to how people can connect and help us get going.
Excellent. And I see Nico pulled up our producer, an event that's coming up. I was going to ask you about that as well. So you have a Walk to Remember 2022 that's coming up on June 5th. That's a fundraising initiative.
Yes, that's one of our first fundraisers that we're going to do. And one of the purposes of doing it is to do an honor walk, so people can walk in honor of loved ones that have passed away. And that's pretty important to offer to the community, that we certainly do hold their loved ones in our heart and want to acknowledge them and remember them. And yeah, so that's one of the purposes of the walk.
Great. And are there other events scheduled? I imagine there'll be others coming, but you might not have them set up yet.
Yes, absolutely. We have our first annual gala that's going to take place at the Norlands on November the 26th of this year. So details will be announced after the walk on our website and our social media.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate the work you guys are doing. I really do. It's very important. As I said, whether we like it or not, we're all going to need that help at some time or another. And it takes some strong people to do it. So thank you very much for coming on the show and telling us about it today and the work you're doing to get that facility going down there. And I hope everything goes grandly and you get that up and running soon.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Great. No problem at all. Thanks, guys. And perhaps we'll talk again later.
Thank you.
So yes, that was Kinga Zentner and Celeste Mint of the Guided Journeys Foundation. And as you see, they're doing some very important work, and it's work, as I said, it's an issue, it's a subject I have a difficult time with. You know me, I'm a guy who babbles about everything and goes on about everything and talks at length and to no end, but it's a subject I dodge, and it's an important one. We want to deal with our loved ones. We want to set things up for ourselves. And there's clearly, I was quite surprised how few facilities there are when there's no hospice south of Okotoks. So check those guys out. It's again, Guided Journeys Foundation, and see if you can lend them a hand, or if their services might be something that you might want to take advantage of it at some point down the road. So that was a good conversation there. Let me talk. Let's get on, I guess, back to our political bent, though. And again, if you want more information, look those guys up and see what you can do. Let's get back into some politics here. We actually got to speak about one of our sponsors, and I'm going to be talking to the head of that organization right away, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. We have all this crazy stuff going on, as I was ranting about, with the firearms control, the laws, the things that are coming in. Well, one of the many roles that the CSSA does, they offer a lot of resources for firearm aficionados or people who want to get into utilizing firearms, collecting them, any of the things you want to do with them, you got to check them out. It's as their name says it all. It's a shooting sports association. Things, as you can see, black powder rifles or target shooting, trap shooting, hunting, collecting, all those things that the government, though, unfortunately does not want you to have the right or ability to do. CSSA, not only do they share all those videos for safe utilization of firearms, that's a great one. Somebody training for the Olympics. I mean, there's so many things that are harmless and fantastic sports, but you got to protect them. And this association networks, brings firearm owners together, and they lobby on your behalf. So get on there, check them out, CSSA-CILA.org. It's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And hey, if you want to hang on to your firearms, you got to fight back because they're looking to take them away from you. So we'll talk to Tony in a little while when he comes on. He should be on fairly soon. As I said, it's a pretty packed show. So let's see. This is interesting. Again, seeing our entrenched, corrupted, nasty federal government. Mark Carney, people might know the name. I mean, he's a pure figure of the Laurentian elite establishment, really out of central Canada. His name pops up all over. I think he was heading the Bank of Canada for some time. Then he was over in England heading theirs or something, I think, for a bit there. And now, I mean, a lot of people think he's a favorite he might come back and when Trudeau, whenever the heck he steps down and retires, a lot of people think Mark Carney might be the one coming in to try and fill his clown shoes. And Carney, unlike Justin, isn't stupid. I don't like what he is and what he represents, but he's no fool. He's in fact quite dangerous. And he's the UN special envoy right now. And he was appealing for cash donations to a Liberal Party think tank. This is nice, eh? This is what our elected officials are doing. This is what Mark Carney's doing. He's been appointed as a UN envoy. I don't even want to start about the UN. We don't have time for that today. Maybe after I talk to Tony, but we'll see. There's so much to cover on these things. But he's out there rubbing shoulders with the United Nations again, with a vile organization. He's raising money for a liberal group. This isn't what these guys are supposed to be sent over there for, although I'm not sure what they should be doing with the UN in general anyways, but this is what they're up to. It's so flagrant and blatant, the insider trading, and again, I'll use that word, corruption of this federal state that we have right now. And again, Carney is as entrenched with the Liberals as it gets. He was a former party of the president. He was a campaign organizer for Trudeau, a press aide. He's been into everything, and now he's raising money through his UN position. So, I mean, how far is this going to go? Are the Liberals going to start getting their ambassadors to hold fundraising dinners for the Liberal Party overseas in the embassies? What other aspects are the Liberals going to use to keep strengthening and promoting themselves, on our backs for their ridiculous mandates and governance? I think maybe I'll move on into that, the ridiculous mandates and governance, and bring in our guest, Tony Bernardo. He's been on the show before, and as you heard me a couple of minutes ago talking about the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, Tony Bernardo is the head of that group, and they've been lobbying. Well, this is a time I'm certain Tony's been very busy, so I really appreciate you coming on to talk to us today, Tony.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be here, Cory.
Yeah, so I guess, we're not, I wouldn't imagine too many people are terribly surprised to see a move like this out of our federal government. But it's really shown their true colors. They're moving toward, they're freezing handgun sales, bringing in a bunch of other legislation. And as I feel, it's probably just the beginning of a heck of a lot more.
Well, it is actually, and there's a heck of a lot more in that bill already now than just simply freezing handguns. There's a provision in the bill that will have a huge and dramatic effect on hunters and just casual shooters and farmers, and that is the bill that limits the magazines of long guns to 5 rounds. This is not the semi-automatic black rifles. This is all long guns, right down to 22 rimfires.
Yeah, I was saying that earlier in the show. I've got a little 22 rimfire rifle in my house. It's a varmint gun. It's not used and it's not traditionally used for robberies or mass shootings or anything of the sort. And now, unless I modify those little clips that go into that little thing, it'll suddenly become illegal.
Well, that's right. And if you're using one that has magazines, detachable magazines, you've got one of the easy ones to deal with because you can simply weld a steel pin through the metal. But many of these guns, like approximately 50% of all the long guns in Canada, have tube magazines. And the magazines on most of these is simply a metal tube. You put your cartridges in the metal tube, and then a spring follower goes and pushes them into the actual chamber. The legislation does not say modify the capacity of the gun to 5 rounds or less. It says modify the magazine. And when you're dealing with legislation, you're dealing with the minutia of words. When they say magazine, they're talking about specifically the magazine, not the magazine follower, not the spring, not any other part of the magazine that you might add. They're saying the magazine. In
So,
these 2 magazine guns, it's impossible on about half of them.
yeah, so you essentially that will end up, I mean, assuming everything follows through, with illegalizing what was a perfectly legal and viable firearm that a person presumably then, if they can't modify it, would have to turn it in.
Well, you're talking about many millions of long guns here, and most of them are going to be Cory 22s that have been manufactured in Ontario since the beginning of time and are still manufactured in Ontario under the Savage name. Many of these guns have tubular magazines. Now, if you want to start right from the very basics of creating the magazine, well, maybe it's a lot easier to do it that way. But when you're dealing with ones that hold 14 or 15 22 cartridges, modifying those mags are really difficult. And then there's 2 magazines that feed from the buttstock, and they're actually integral to the stock of the gun. To change that magazine, you have to destroy the back of the end of the gun. Many of these guns, most of them, are not made anymore. Now, I was talking to one of our gun shop owners earlier today, and he and one of his gunsmiths took a Winchester 94. That's a standard lever action rifle that's used for deer in 30-30 caliber. Now, this gun was made and designed in 1894 and has been continuously made to this day. It took them 4 hours, 2 people, including a gunsmith, 4 hours to modify the magazine. That's over $300 in shop time to take a deer rifle from 6 shots to 5 shots. This is insane. This is the red line. People are not going to cross this line. It is not possible to do this.
Oh, and then I mean another aspect of this whole thing is getting more into the political. But I mean this legislation was obviously created and drafted some time ago, but they
Yeah.
waited for a foreign firearm tragedy before they decided to impose it. I mean that was no mistake on their part, and the
No,
politics
of
of it I
course.
find really repugnant, to be honest. I mean if this was a real pressing issue, if they really had to crack down and bring in all these things, then they should have done this months ago. Why wait until now? And it's political. It's not safety.
Sure. And if it was really an issue, it would have been done many, many years ago. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but every single year of the Trudeau tenure, gun crime, gang crime has risen every year. When you look back at 25 years ago, before the Liberals started doing all their gun control nonsense, gun crime was way lower than it is now. And it's just proof positive that these gun control measures that they're doing are ineffectual. In fact, you can't find a single jurisdiction anywhere in the world where gun control has worked.
Oh, and I mean, Justin Trudeau was asked quite directly at a conference, just saying, that look, it's not legally owned handguns that have been committing these crimes. We have the stats,
Right.
we have the numbers. Why are you cracking down on it? Of course, he wouldn't even answer. He just sidetracked off into a totally separate issue altogether. They know
Sure.
this; they just don't care.
And when they give you the stats, and this includes police stats, they're saying somewhere between 82 and 85% of all the crime guns in Canada originate in the United States, as opposed to the rest, which presumably originate in Canada. But in fact, they don't. Many of these guns come in from Eastern Europe, they come in from China, and many of them come in from stolen police guns and stolen military guns. They don't break any of that stuff down, probably because they don't know half of it. But when they actually look at the guns that originate with a firearm purchased from a lawful firearms owner in Canada, the amount is infinitesimal. It's so small. In fact, I can remember back 7 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago maybe, there was a lawful firearms owner that shot somebody in Toronto on the street. And it made national headlines because it was so rare. It was the man bites dog scenario. This is just so rare for this to happen. People just don't use handguns like that in this country. We use them for target shooting.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think most law-abiding firearm owners would welcome more efforts to stop the smuggling, to hinder that. I mean, to get after the criminals. I mean, we're more than overjoyed to see that. We don't want to see people hurt, and we don't like seeing these illegal firearms giving everybody else a bad name.
Well, that's right, and the lawful firearms owners traditionally have been very supportive of these measures, but honestly, I think that's coming to an end. I think many lawful firearms owners in this country have simply had enough, and they're just going to turn their back on the system and walk away. This is very unfortunate because a society needs people to be lawful in order for the society to have order. And we've just got a couple of million people out there that have just said, okay, that's it. They've crossed the red line, and that's it. We're not playing anymore.
Yeah, they create criminals. I remember in the 90s with the registry and what was it, C68 back then, I think. But I remember hosting an organization back then that was called the Law Abiding Unregistered Firearms Association. These were
That's correct.
people who were content firearm owners, law-abiding individuals, but they chose not to register. They're saying you're forcing us to be criminals, but we will not register. We will not do it. I guess it was kind of an act of civil disobedience in a sense. And
It is.
when the laws get too unfair, people just won't respect them any longer.
Well, that's exactly it. It's like going out to one of the major highways that has 100 or 120 kilometer an hour speed limit and putting out a sign that says you have to do 60. Are people going to do it? No, they're not. They're going to illegally speed because it's a stupid and dumb thing to do on a superhighway. But you know that this is what happens when you just put too many layers of the onion on top of it, and this is what they're doing. They're going now into areas that they should never ever tread into, because the average farmer out there is not going to take his granddad's old Cooey 22 into a gunsmith and spend $300 or $400 on having a magazine converted. He's not going to do it. And then, you know, the most popular 22 in the world is the Ruger 1022. And there are God knows how many of them in Canada. But the reason they're called the 1022 is the magazine is a little block. And in that little block, it holds 10 rounds of 22. There is no way to take that magazine that I'm aware of and permanently affix it to 5 rounds, because the magazine itself is a block. It's a solid sealed block that you can't disassemble very easily. This isn't going to happen, Cory. It's not going to happen.
Oh, and it's not making anybody any safer. That's the big frustration out of the whole thing. I mean, hey, if this actually worked, I'd be singing a different tune. If you could point to something and say, you know what, nobody will ever get shot again if we do this, or we'll reduce it dramatically. Fine,
Right.
But there's no evidence to say any of that. But
Well, sure. And to regress for a minute here into the handgun issue again, we're dealing with 1.1 million handguns, average value $1,000. Let's talk about here $1 billion worth of Canadians' property that has just been made worthless. You can't sell it, you can't trade it, and when the person dies and that money goes into the estate of the individual, the government comes and takes the property. Remember, they don't take the money. It's not like the money is going to be used to offset our enormous tax burdens or to pay off our deficits, or our debts, I should say. It's not like the money's used for that. They're literally burning $1 billion worth of Canadians' money for absolutely no purpose whatsoever. This is criminal, absolutely criminal. And everybody in our community is just shaking their head and going, this makes no sense. It's not like the government's taking the property and paying us compensation. They're just stealing it. And worse, they're stealing it from our widows. They're stealing it from our families. This is incredible.
And that's a term I've used over and over on this show when it comes to things like this. If they take your property without your permission, I don't care how much they pay me. If they paid me $100,000 for a $200 22, if you didn't have my permission to take it away, you were stealing it. It doesn't matter what you gave me later. That's not the case. But
That's right.
Getting to the harder part, though, what do we do about it? How can we stop this, move right now? We've got a government with an informal coalition that doesn't show any signs of backing down on anything. How can we push back on this?
Well, you can push back in some ways. Okay, for example, things still has to go to committee in the Senate and the House, and in those committees, we'll be able to testify to the mistakes they're making vis-a-vis magazines, and perhaps make some changes there. I do say perhaps, because this government's never been particularly willing to listen to citizens. Remember, of course, that the Trudeau government not only has a majority, but with the addition of the new NDP Liberals that they have out there, they have a super majority, and they could put through anything they want to put through, no matter what we think, no matter what we say. How do we stop it? Well, I don't know. I mean, realistically, the government is entitled to make laws. That's what they're elected for. Certainly, we can get a better government in next time, and that requires that people actually get off their butt and support one. Okay, I'm personally, I'm very, very pleased to see Mr. Poilievre running. I'm an unabashed supporter of his, and I believe that he's the first person that's got the fire in his belly to actually change the course that the country is on, going downhill. I don't mean to make this a commercial for him, because it's not. Okay, but if you don't change the way the government looks at things, the way the government works, you're not going to change this. The government has the legal authority to do this. And you might go ahead and file a lawsuit against them, but good luck on that, because they have unlimited amounts of money, your money, to use against you. So you can write to your MP. That's a great thing to do for everybody. Write their MP. You can go on parl.gc.ca, and I'll repeat that, parl, PARL.gc.ca, and on there is a list of every MP in Canada, including your MP, whoever that is, Liberal, NDP, Conservative, doesn't matter, but get on there and write your MP, tell them that you're really, really pissed and you're not going to take it anymore, and say you've got to do something to change this. And that is a faint hope, but it's the only one we've got to get rid of this thing.
That's it. I mean, giving up, you'll lose for sure. So you might as well keep pushing, even if it seems futile. I mean, things do change sometimes. We sometimes win. And if we could change that government, that would be a big win. Of course, that might be what it takes. But also the Senate, it's surprising. They've been getting more active lately and actually starting to do their job a bit with that Senate S7. I don't know if you've been watching that, but that's the one that allows customs agents to rifle through your phones and laptops. Well, a couple of Liberal appointed senators actually got up and just ripped that to shreds and said it's a breach of authority. So, the Senate has some power if they want to exercise it, and perhaps the senators will speak up on this legislation as well. It has to go through there.
Sure, and what we hear in the Senate on a fairly regular basis is the senators are a little bit fed up with Trudeau's antics all the time, and this kind of nonsensical legislation that does not make the problem better. It makes the problem worse. Have you ever heard the old saying, in for a penny, in for a pound? Well, if you're going to break the law and say, I'm not going to have my magazine converted, well, then what difference would it make if you transferred that very same firearm to somebody without going through their new registration process? Well, it doesn't make a difference. You're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. So people are going to go down that route. And I'll tell you now, this new registration process that has been forgotten in this muddle, which is only a couple of weeks old now, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Not only is it usable for absolutely nothing, but in doing so, you have to obtain information that an unscrupulous person could use to illegally buy guns. I mean, they've made the problem worse, not better. And again, people aren't going to go through that system. They want to give a firearm to their son or daughter. they're not going to go through that stupid registry system. They're just going to give it to them. And it's going to be legal in the sense that that person's licensed to have it, but they're not going to use that dumb system. It's not going to happen.
No, it's unworkable, and it won't do a darn thing for all the existing firearms that are already out there. So, I mean, if you have a registry, if indeed one could ever be useful, it has to have massive compliance to be at all useful, and accuracy. And in this case, it wouldn't have either. So,
yeah, and in the last system, where people were obligated to register, and many did, at the end of years of this, it was cost $2 billion. And you couldn't use any of the evidence in court because it was so corrupted and so bad. Does anybody think the computer today is going to do it any better than the computer did 15 years ago? I mean, this doesn't work. You can't find a jurisdiction anywhere in the world where gun control has worked. Even Britain, which is a little tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, they can't stop it. Australia can't stop it. And if you can't stop it on an island, what are you going to do with the world's longest undefended border of the largest firearms owning population in the world?
yeah, no, it's just beyond the pale. Well, we'll keep at it. So I appreciate you coming on to talk to us today, Tony. Where can people find more information about the CSSA?
Okay, go to cssa-cila.org.
Okay, great. And outside of that, they can just Google the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and all those resources are there. Well, thanks for keeping up fighting the good fight, Tony. And, well, we can never give up hope. We just got to keep pushing.
Thanks for helping, Cory.
All right, thanks. That was, as I said, Tony Bernardo of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And as you guys know on this show, you've heard me mention that organization a lot of times. And it's one of those sponsors I like talking about because, hey, they're good for us. They are standing up for us, and we need to help them do it. You know, it takes participation in order to have an impact and be effective. So let's see what else we've got. We're getting near the end of the show here now. It was a pretty full one, 3 sets of guests going on today. I'm going to start to line things up for tomorrow. Lots to talk about overall, guys. And somebody else, I think it was Pamela or somebody was asking about a quote that Tony had put out, and where, if it's written anywhere, it will be at that website at the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. They have their press releases there and things like that. If you search it out, it could be there. So tomorrow, I'm going to have Ed Amar on. He was actually the founding chairman of the UCP, and he's just been speaking out. I mean, we're going into the leadership race. Their committee is forming things for the rules, the basis, and everything. And Mr. Amar, just wants to make sure it's a good, fair, open process. So, I mean, it's good to have some discussions from people who worked within these parties and know about these things to try and get a good, trustworthy process going right now. So we're going to have him on to talk about it. And then we're going to turn a bit towards the Ontario election. This one's, at least for us out in the West, been sliding under the radar a lot. I think partially because it looked like it was a shoe-in for Ford, though I imagine, nothing's ever for sure, but it's looking pretty solid. And but all the same, it's important, and it's our biggest province, whether we like them or not. And we have a lot of viewers and listeners out in Ontario. So we've got our two main reporters out there, Matthew Horwood, he's our Ottawa man there, and Jonathan Bradley. And they're both going to come on the show, and we'll just discuss what's going into this election. What are perhaps some seats that are up for grabs? What are some of the things, in the campaign points and so on? And just some speculation. And tomorrow night, those election results are going to come in, a Thursday election, which is really unusual. And that team of two Western Standard reporters will be back on Friday again, and then we'll dissect and talk about, well, what happened? What are we looking at? And what's in store for the province of Ontario? So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Always appreciate it. And I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.